picture is worth 1,000 words, and these pictures touched every heart that have been looking at what you've done in showing his life. Let me just remind you that in dying, Christ destroyed both the fear and the power of death. In rising, Christ restored our hope, both in abundant life and everlasting life. One day Christ will come again in glory, as in Christian baptism, James B. Morris Jr. put on the Lord Jesus Christ. So Jim is now clothed with glory. Here and now, dear friends, we are all God's children. What we shall be has not yet been revealed, but we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And those who have this hope in their heart, as Jim did, will keep themselves in the faith. For Jesus said, I am resurrection, I am life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, yet shall they live. Whoever lives and believes in me shall never die, for I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I died, but I am alive forevermore, and I hold the keys to hell and death. And because I live, you shall live also. We've gathered here today to praise God, to witness to our common faith, and to celebrate a very beautiful life. We come together in a common grief. We acknowledge human loss, and we ask God to grant every one of us his grace, that in pain we would find comfort, that in sorrow we would have hope, and that in the face of death, we would be positive about the resurrection.
So they go to church, they outside I stood, saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush, singing like a sweet church. Made me wanna bow my head. I remember when the church let out. How things have changed since then. Everything's over now. Used to be a world out there, and the second rate had me down. I'm walking around the mountain there. Everything's over.
As I was preparing for this memorial service today, I wondered how Jim would want to be remembered. I have a few thoughts I'd like to share with you today. First and foremost, I would say that he would want people to know how much he loved Gail, Mindy, Amy, Dane, Chelsea, Everett, and how he would have loved little Etta, James. Jim was devoted to his family, loved being a husband, father, grandfather. Early on, Jim demonstrated to me what it was like to be a dad. Since he and Gail had kids before Teresa and I, when our twin sons, Tyler and Travis, were very young, and Teresa and I weren't getting much sleep, Jim organized a night with some other guys to take the night shift so that Teresa and I could get a good night's sleep. And he took care of the kids, along with the other guys in the house. Not many guys would have tackled such a job as that, but Jim was like that. A great family guy who was ready and willing to serve. 18 years later, Jim was one of the men who attended our church-sponsored Father-Son weekend retreat. Jim offered words of encouragement to Tyler and Travis after they graduated from high school and before they went to college. Uncle Jim was always a great encouragement to our sons. Second, I think that Jim would want to be remembered for his ability to observe and know things about this world. Jim had one of the sharpest minds I have ever known. He had the ability to know and remember amazing things. In the early years of our relationship, the game Trivial Pursuit came out. No one wanted to be on the opposite team with Jim. I was grateful he decided that it was better if guys played the girls. And later on, when Jim pursued his doctoral degree, he had to take an entrance exam to qualify for acceptance. And I remember Jim telling me that he got a perfect score on the logic section. I'm not sure how many other people have done that. Jim was truly one of the smartest guys I've ever known. Third, Jim was a music lover. Many years ago, I remember going to see the movie The Big Chill with Teresa, of course, and Jim and Gabe. The soundtrack from that movie was an early indication that Jim and I had similar interests in music, although not necessarily always the same genres. A few years later, after the Big Chill, Teresa and I went to Tallahassee with Jim and Gail to see Bruce Springsteen in concert. A fun event that actually included Mindy in Gail's room. And I know many of you probably here have attended some of the house concerts that Jim loved to host, and of course he loved to play and sing with his guitar. Jim was also a huge Florida State fan, and that would have normally been a big stumbling block for a guy like myself who loves the Gators. However, Jim had a way of being able to talk about football without making it confrontational. One of my happiest memories were the 3 or 4 years that Jim and I got together. Every Saturday. We were younger then. We threw the football, and we talked about the Gators and the Seminoles and life in general. Oh dear, I'm so sorry. Often we had others join us for those football games, including Patty, who was known as Too Loud. We all had nicknames, but hers was the most unique. And for many years before the Florida State-Florida game, Jim and I would talk on the phone because we knew one of us was going to lose the next day. And Jim had it figured out that the best way to eliminate division between us was to talk the night before the game and then ease back into the relationship after. Finally, and sadly, many of our recent memories involve Jim's decade of struggle with cancer. However, Jim took the news of his illness with courage and a pragmatism that was hard for me to understand. Jim's quick mind was able to understand things that I couldn't. Yet he was able to share the news about his condition and prognosis with bravery and a strong faith. Jim fought through all the procedures with a hope of recovery and an amazing sense of humor when faced with grim possibilities. Jim never gave up, but unfortunately the cumulative effects were just too much. While many would remember Jim for one of these things, his love of his family, his intelligence, love of music, Seminoles, his fight with cancer, I believe that the most memorable thing about Jim was his unique ability to understand each one of us for who we are. While all friends share some similar interests, it is a special friend who truly gets us. I'm sure that many of you here who are gathered shared a conversation with Jim at some point in your life where he might have pointed out something that you just hadn't seen before. Gail once told me that friends are your chosen family, and I thank God. I thank God for the friendship I had with Jim. We've been blessed to have our family lives intertwined with Jim and Gail's and the girls for 40 years. I've never known anybody quite like Jim. His amazing ability to see things the way that he did. And I'm sure that's what made him so good at his job. But for those of us who were his friends, we got to enjoy his unique thoughts insights, and perspective of life. Thanks, and I'm really sorry about that.
When Gail asked me to speak, I thought, this is a mistake. I mean, Jim was one of my most cherished friends. But the truth is that most of you knew him and loved him for decades before I had the good fortune to meet him. That good fortune began 11 years ago at a training event at USF. During one of the breaks, I started chatting with this other psychologist. Little did I know that he was one of the most respected psychologists in Tampa Bay. But I could tell that he was clearly super smart, but also easy to talk to, interesting and funny. We clicked, and we stayed in touch. Pretty soon, Jim became my go-to guy for all the tough clinical questions, and I became his. Jim also became the person I gravitated to at professional meetings. Now, neither of us was very keen on doing the serious networking that you're supposed to do at those kinds of meetings, and I was especially avoidant. So Jim proposed a bet to see who could collect the most business cards from the other attendees. I forget the final count, but I was the real winner because with Jim's prodding, I became a master mingler. In fact, so much so that Jim would laugh at me for working the crowd at every meeting after that. At the end of each meeting, Jim and I would linger to chat, maybe for a half hour, maybe for a good bit longer. With Jim, there was never a shortage of interesting conversation. During one of those chats, Jim said, "You know, Jeremy, we should write a book about how to help families in divorce." And so we did. Over the next 2.5 years, we spent an inordinate amount of time together, and in the process, we both became better writers, and we became better friends. Jim was a stickler for making me outline ideas instead of just jumping in and writing, which was my usual style. And we spent hours debating the fine points of English grammar, such as whether to put a comma after each item in a series. Incidentally, the answer is yes. At our first sit-down writing session at a Starbucks on Racetrack Road, which we just passed on the way here today, Jim mentioned that he was dealing with the early phase of a challenging type of cancer. Looking back, it amazes me that Jim was willing to spend so many hours negotiating minutiae with me, even with the awareness that time might be finite. I think it was because he was a consummate professional, so anything he did, he wanted to do properly. I think we also just enjoyed hanging out together, even if the topic was the appropriate use of the semicolon. Eventually, we published the book. We got a kick out of saying that we were authors, though Jim kept reminding me that the book was, most of all, just an expensive business card to hand out to colleagues. But this may be the one thing that Jim misjudged. In fact, the book really has helped a lot of people going through hard times. That has a lot to do with Jim's insistence on balancing solid research with a kind and gentle tone. To this day, whenever I share the book, I say, I wrote this book with my good friend, Jim Morris. I'd like folks to know that Jim left this gift for them and that his voice lives on. A few years back, Jim upped the ante in our friendship, pun intended, by introducing me to his poker buddies. Larry, Gary, Art, Greg, Keith, Joe, Bob, Karen, Claire, and the rest. If the quality of one's friends is a measure of success, then Jim succeeded stupendously. I am grateful to Jim to this day for welcoming me into that inner sanctum of his lifelong friends. Of course, you can't think of Jim without thinking of the person who mattered most to him, and that is Gail. You could see Jim's love for Gail every time he looked at her, and you could hear it in his voice every time he spoke her name. And the same for Mindy and Amy and Dane and Chelsea, all whom he adored. And forever, who brought him so much joy as time wound down. And for the whole rest of his family, and for all his friends, Jim loved you all without limits, as I'm sure you know. So now it's a year, a little more, since Jim moved on. I know that as we grieve, it's supposed to get easier, though I have to confess that I miss Jim more now than ever before. But as much as I miss him, he is still present for me. I can hear his calm and reassuring voice, and it steadies me, and it makes me smile. So today, with all of you who love Jim, I celebrate the incredible man that we were all so very lucky to have known. May his memory be a blessing for each of us every day.
To a group of us, his nickname was Diamond Jim. And that name fits him in a lot of ways. It fits him because Jim was a treasure. He was a gem, G-E-M, of a friend. Now, a diamond is a precious gemstone whose unique beauty and strength comes from how well its component atoms fit, bind together with one another. The carbon atoms of diamonds are bound so tightly together that it is the hardest substance on earth, 4 times harder than second place. It is this strength and durability that gives the diamond its name. It comes from the Greek word for unbreakable. Unbreakable bonds. Enduring bonds. It is these unbreakable bonds of carbon atoms that make the diamond the precious gem it is. It is the unbreakable bonds of family and friendship that made our Jim Morris. He formed those bonds with each of us and amongst all of us. To me, it is his legacy. He is, now and forever, Diamond Jim. But he first earned the name playing poker. And I'm going to tell this story because it illustrates how Jim had a way of getting friends together, and with him as the catalyst, having small gatherings grow into something more. Back a good long time ago, decades actually, Jim organized a get-together at which a group of friends played cards. It was fun, and since it was fun, we started doing it fairly often. And along the way, Jim began studying Texas Hold'em poker. So gradually, he introduced it to the rest of us. And Jim's interest and enthusiasm for the game was contagious. We evolved with Jim. Hold'em soon became the only type of poker that we played. We became more regular about it. We started playing monthly tournaments on a set date. We put it on our calendars. And eventually we added a big annual event to which we all traveled to a lodge in rural Alabama for a 3-day weekend tournament of playing poker. Jim, of course, won the first year. The next year, lo and behold, Jim won again. And I don't remember if a diamond flush figured into it or not, but that after that first big annual event, Jim became forever Diamond Jim. Hearing that name in poker and in many other ways, he was the best of us. Now, Jim was already immunocompromised when COVID struck, and of necessity, he became even more isolated. But not from his poker group. Unbreakable bonds of friendship Don't isolate easily. Unbreakable bonds of friendship find a way. During COVID, we actually increased our contact with our beloved Diamond Jim. We moved our poker games to an online app. We used another app to see each other and converse with each other. Instead of once a month, we started playing twice a week. It was a joy to all of us, and especially for Jim. During these months of isolation, we played and conversed with him more than ever. Truly, Jim inspired meaningful and enduring friendships. Jim did this same friendship forging in other circles. He had his circle of house concert friends, and some of you are here. And he had his group of church-going friends, and many of you are here. And he formed strong bonds of friendship with work colleagues, and with one he co-wrote a book. You just heard from him. Now, Jim was busy forging these unbreakable bonds of friendship, and it was an extraordinary gift. Now, first and foremost in his life, Jim was about family. Gail, his wife, Mindy and Amy, his daughters, were the absolute loves of his life, and his grandson, Everett, could not have been more adored. But after family, Jim was about friends. And I am beyond lucky to have been one. I loved every wide-ranging conversation we ever had, every common book we ever read, every card game we ever played. I loved being in Jim's presence, and I smiled, and I laughed, and I enjoyed life more when I was. He's gone now. After more than a decade-long battle with lymphoma, my dear friend, our dear friend Jim Morris, has left this earthly home. He can say with certainty, I have fought an excellent fight. I have finished my race. I have kept the faith. He was a precious gem. He was Diamond Jim.
Before I start with my prepared remarks, I'd like to share a couple of things that happened this past week related to Jim. One is I started reading a book a little over a week ago, Think Like a Monk by Jay Sheedy. And I mentioned it to Gail because the beginning of the book talks about higher values that the monks try to practice and follow as closely as they can. And as you'll probably agree when I read those to you, you will see that Jim was trying to achieve those. I called Gail and mentioned that I was going to throw this in, and she said, oh, yeah, Jim had been meditating. He had been practicing meditation. I did not know that. I was not surprised to learn so. Jim had so many things about him that you really had to find out without him telling you. I'll get to that a little later too. But the higher values that they listed in the Bhagavad Gita, which is considered the life manual for monks, were fearlessness, purity of mind, gratitude, service and charity, acceptance, performing sacrifice, deep study, austerity, straightforwardness, nonviolence, truthfulness, absence of anger, compassion toward all living beings, satisfaction, gentleness and kindness, integrity, and determination. And just getting started in this book, he immediately pops to mind. Not that, I mean, he often did anyways. And as I thought about what I wanted to say today, I decided I'm just going to tell you what I learned about Jim through our friendship. And the first thing I learned about Jim was his compassion for others. And that I learned prior to meeting Jim. We both worked for a wilderness camping program, the Eckerd Youth Program. And I heard of Chief Jim, who worked over at Camp Ihauki. And I knew that, I'd heard that what a good job he was doing and how long he'd stayed. And I knew that you could not stay with this job and do the kind of work he was doing without having a strong compassion for others. Our paths crossed. We actually met after both of us moving to positions at the Clearwater office, the headquarters for Eckerd. And that's when I learned what a friendly guy and what a kind man he was. No matter what his activity was during the day, whether it was just social interaction with Jim, or if we worked on a project together, or were in a meeting together, everyone in the office lit up when Jim came around. He had that great smile. He was so friendly and nice to everyone. The kindness just showed through. Next, I learned about Jim's playful side. He did like jokes. He did like teasing. And he did like little pranks. I always thought they were good on the corny side, as a lot of us did. And I think there was a reason for that. I think Jim was trying to be so careful that he did not have an enjoyment or an interaction at the expense of someone else. So he kept everything so safe and calm that it often came across a little bit corny. He told me at the time that he and the girls' favorite show was America's Funny Home Videos. And they convinced Jim that if he would get the camera out, they could perform. They would have such amusing and entertaining antics that certainly they could make the TV show. Now I know I'm pretty sure Jim got the camera out. I'm not sure that they ever produced anything of quality enough to send into the show. But Jim was certainly willing to go along with his girls and do that. Speaking of Mindy and Amy, the next thing I learned about Jim was what a stellar parent he was. My wife soon started working in the Clearwater office, Debbie, and we had a 3-hour round-trip commute from Brooksville to Clearwater. Jim approached me and invited Debbie and I to spend the night occasionally to break up that drive. So we were able to see firsthand what a wonderful parent he and Gail were. I know a lot of men who come home from work and they're tired. They need a rest, they need a break, they need a drink. Jim was vitalized walking through the door when he got home. He was now dad. And he could not wait to play, to laugh, to sing, to color. Whatever was going on, he threw himself into it. And the next thing I learned, and again Debbie and I were childless at the time. We had talked about children. And one day after leaving the Morris' house, Debbie said, I am fully committed. If this is what a family is like, I'm fully committed to children. I mean, it was such a great model for the two of us. The other thing I learned was what a devoted and loving husband Jim was. Again, you spend the evening, spend that much time with the family and their interaction, and you can see, I've already heard the glint in his eye and that little sly smile he had. If Gail was engaged in the conversation, Jim was over to the side, just watching and having such pleasure in seeing her interacting with her friends and family. Already heard from the others what a good friend Jim was. We're having lunch one day while we're working in the Clearwater office, and Jim told me, I have a goal. I'm setting a new goal for myself, and that is to spend more quality time with my friends. We'd heard about guitar playing. Greg had hosted a guitar gathering at his house one time, and Jim said, we're going to do more of this. So Jim helped to structure and make that a regular monthly event. So in addition to and then the poker games became a monthly event. Jim was reaching out to include time with his friends as much as he possibly could. He hosted some game nights at his house. We heard of the house concerts, which weren't quite as regular, but that's a pretty big event to host. And then I was able to watch not only he was having his friends over for this, but strangers were coming into his home and equally invited, and he was equally happy to see them and just as kind and friendly with those people as he was with his lifelong friends. Jim was smart. We've already heard that. He was well-educated, read extensively. Didn't matter what the subject, politics, religion, science, sports, music, art, movies, current events. Jim always had a lot to offer. I think, Bill, you mentioned sometimes you bring something up and he would be sharing more than you expected to learn from him. He had such a broad knowledge. Where I think I noticed his intelligence most was some of the times, as you can imagine, groups get together and politics, religion come up. Things can get disagreeable or heated a little bit. Jim often kind of sat more silently during those. Eventually someone would say, Jim, what are your thoughts about this? And he was able to take both sides of the conversation, pull it together, distill it, phrase it in a way that everyone's nodding their head, yes, 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 even if he was, and he would share his opinion, his position on it, but everyone would feel okay about what they had contributed, because Jim had such a gift of working with people and understanding people and helping people. There's no wonder that he ended up being a psychologist. Jim was very versatile. We've already mentioned many things he did. During the poker week I was up in Alabama, we played a lot of poker, but we needed a break from poker, so we would go outside and play bocce ball out in the yard. And Jim was always just as happy to play as the rest of us. I was reading the paper one morning up in Brooksville, and Spring Hill was hosting a bocce tournament. And I thought, I'll see if anyone wants to go. Jim was the first to respond, yes. We had no idea if we could play bocce on bocce. but Jim was ready and willing to jump right in. He came to us one time and said, hey, I've got a new activity that we could do. We could go take a curling class. It was a surprise to me that in Central Florida you can take a curling class. I was a little disappointed in the long run that he brought that up. It took me a year to recover from curling. And I won't get into that. If you really want to believe me, you can ask me later. It took a while. Then I learned about Jim. I mean, you always know this, but Jim lived his life with grace. And it was never more evident than in his battle with cancer. We already heard that Jim sent out an email. He would talk about his diagnosis. He would talk about his treatment. He would talk about his prognosis. And he was very straightforward to say, my prognosis, I have some short-term progress here, but I have a terminal disease. And he knew that, and he, at the same time, would let us know, but I want you to know I am completely happy with my life. My wife, my children, my family, my friends, my successes, my activities. He was completely satisfied. I hope only that am I ever in a situation that he faced, that I could have the same kind of grace that he showed during his battle with cancer. I have two quotes that I want to share, and one is by Leo Rostand. He's a Yiddish philosopher. I cannot believe that the purpose of life is to be happy. I think the purpose of life is to be useful, to be compassionate. It is above all to matter, to count, to stand for something, to have made a difference that you have lived at all. And when I read that, again, Jim comes directly to mind. The next quote I want to share is an unknown author, and that is, does the song of the sea end at the shore or in the hearts of those who listen to it? Jim, your song lives in my heart. It has, it will. I will think of what would Jim do many, many times as I continue my path in life. Gail, I have a candle that I want to give to you. And whenever you have a family event, a friend event, I want you to bring this candle out, light this candle during the event. Jim's spirit will burn through the flame of this candle. Finally, I want to do one more thing. I want to stand and together sing a chorus of Amen for life well lived, well loved, and well played. We'll be joining Legacy of Black and Bob.
Amen.
I cannot tell you how happy I am to see each one of you. You were Jim's people, and you're my people. This group really represents those who followed Jim, who were on his mailing list, who cared, who over the years knew the story, knew our journey, and cared about it and expressed that. And Jim loved you. He would be very, very, very touched that you're here, and we're all very touched too. I hope that you'll spend time with each other, and some of you don't know each other, but you all have very similar and common bonds in your love for Jim. And we finally made it. Are you kidding? It's been over a year, and I will tell you, Jim and I did talk about having a gathering before he passed away, because of course he wanted to be here too. And we really did. We were going to do it at Bon Appetit, which is where we had our reception for our wedding. And it just seemed like a great place to do that, and we'd been to somebody else's there, but then it didn't seem quite right, and then that immunocompromised stuff, and then that COVID stuff, and everything just kind of got in the way, but I was going to wait until we could hug, and look, we can hug again, you know, it's like, okay. I know you'll forgive me. I'm going to read. I have this all written out because I have a lot of things I want to say, and I don't want to miss them, and I couldn't do this without notes. Some of you might not realize this, but Jim and I met each other while we were training at Eckerd Youth Alternatives. This was a year-round residential wilderness program for troubled kids. After a month of training in the woods, 24/7, I might say that again, cooking over fires, sleeping in tents, canoeing down the Swanee, camping along riverbanks, and that's what we did. We pulled right up on the river, and we just pitched tents and camp, and we just were right there. So we didn't know whose property we were on. The world's changed a lot since then. It was about 40 years ago. We were cooking over campfires and learning the ropes of camping and working with groups of 10 campers. By then, we sort of knew we liked each other. It took us 5 years to get to know each other better because we were working 24, at least 5, and we didn't have the same time offs, and our camps were miles apart from one another. So we didn't see each other that much, but we did see each other when we could, and our respect and our love grew for each other over that time. In terms of marriage, we definitely talked about it, but we both had some hesitations. A stumbling block for me was my faith, as Jim struggled to define his, and I could not live without mine. I told the girls, nobody's gonna cry. It's gonna be a celebration. Okay, so one night after much discussion, we decided to meet in the small chapel near our church that we were attending at the time, and because he was very nice about coming. And he really did have a strong faith. He just wasn't quite sure how it all should be put together. But we asked the Lord, we prayed that night and asked the Lord to guide us and bless our next steps. Jim took the advice of our pastor at the time, who told him to walk the walk, even if he did not fully embrace the talk. And that was honestly the ticket for Jim. Jim could live with a simplicity contextualized within vast complexity. And I'm going to say that again because I thought, wow, those words came out really good. And I think Jim would like these. A simplicity contextualized within vast complexity. We live in a world that is very complex. There are some simple things, but Jim was certainly not going to deny the complexity. This stimulated his continual wondering, questioning, studying, and learning. Jim's faith was large, personal, and integral to the man that he was. I think you could tell a lot about a person by the things that they love, and Jim loved a lot. He truly loved life, all of its elements. He loved nature, water. He loved just simply breathing the air. He loved music. He played French horn and trumpet at Tarpon High, but when he picked up a guitar, he really fell in love. He loved the feel, the sound, the music that a guitar availed. He loved to play, and he was working on Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. Seriously. Just months before he died. In fact, he played it for, he has a friend, there were two things that he would rise up for, really, that would stimulate him. Poker, yes, and a friendship with a young man who dear friends of mine had, named Joseph, who stimulated him very much. And he's the only person he ever played that for, which I thought was pretty amazing. He didn't have it all completed though, so it was coming. Jim loved all music, solo, gathering with friends to play, going to or hosting house concerts for professional singer-songwriters, listening with his girls, friends, or while he was playing or working. Jim heard much more in music than I can hear. It was an integral part of his life and his being. Jim loved fun, and you've heard that from others. He made it wherever he went. He loved to talk and visit and share laughter, coffee, or a beer. He loved getting friends together, and he created the events to do so. Guitar gatherings, Valentine parties, he would have those, and the men would make the dinner for the women. And that was really fun, and we would drink. It was great. He loved poker, and he was good at it, as you heard. Doubly fun about poker was it was a vehicle to visit with his friends that he cared for so many years as he was developing new ones that he valued for exactly who they were. He was the one to invite new people in. And like Jeremy was one of the new people in, and that was very fun. And those people have become much closer friends too. Jim loved learning, and this was a lifelong pursuit. He loved learning about everything. Science, religion, astronomy, politics, history, philosophy, all of it held interest to him. Two mainstays of his reading were, and these were lifetime mainstays, were the Bible and Will Durant's Story of Civilization. And if you're not familiar with that, I did bring one volume. And I'm going to tell you, these are highlighted pages. That was a random page. This was a lifetime pursuit. He thought it was so interesting to learn about the Eastern and Western civilizations from all time, in all areas, religion, art, just everything. That was, and ultimately, as you can see, that was not easy to take to Moffat. So he moved to the Kindle version, but we have the volumes, and they are, most of them highlighted. Jim ultimately, let's see, that was the Kindle part. He loved reading, thinking, pondering, and integrating. He also loved to write, and he co-wrote with Jeremy this book that is still being published. And it really is a wonderful book for people who are having difficulties in divorce in terms of their children, because people can be, I don't know if you know this, but contentious. And Jim he was just a nice guy, and he was willing to and working with people to help them to come to terms with, these are children. They're not a part of the issue here, and they do best with both parents. Jim loved psychology. He majored in it at FSU, and he was a forever Knoll fan. He kind of slowed down a little bit on that when it was live or die, a week of mourning or joy. And so as he got older, he decided he had to give it a little rest. He went to graduate school at USF at age 38 and got his PhD in clinical psychology. And this was something that his dad was a clinical psychologist, and he always had that desire to follow in his dad's footsteps. He was a smart man too. Jim valued every element of psychology and the process of being a student, and he was a good one. He loved his profession and all those that he was privileged to work with. There were therapists and practitioners at the University of Virginia in behavioral medicine, counselors, social workers, program developers, and directors upon his return to Clearwater as the clinical director at Eckerd. And then as a forensic psychologist in private practice, he had such a variety of professionals he worked with: lawyers, accountants, judges, other psychologists. He loved all of that. He loved just getting to know these individuals and their pieces of their professions. And from all accounts, he was always very well respected in every positioning for his professionalism and his skills. Jim loved children and babies, and they loved him. He had a gentle and playful dimension that appealed to even the littlest. He was beloved as a chief at camp. He viewed the campers as growing kids in need of healthy adult attention, love, fun, life lessons, education, and esteem building. He was creative with them and with our children, educating through stories, building tents, talking, and listening. Jim loved friends, whether they started out as mine, the girls, or his. They all became ours. He saw the light in everyone and brought it out through his warmth and approachability. Jim loved family. He loved his mom and dad. And he was a very devoted son, never complaining in the latter years for daily caregiving, morning and night, for his dad with Alzheimer's, and now his mom is also 12 years Alzheimer's. He always wanted to give them a sense of joy and love on top of meeting their basic needs. People will say, well, they don't, well, his dad didn't. It wasn't the same case as his mom. She doesn't know us, and there were times when people would say, oh, it really doesn't matter, but to Jim, it did matter. It mattered to just, for the moment, give her his piece of joy. She never knew he was sick. He didn't have hair at one point, and she never knew, because she just was affected that long ago. So, kind of a sad situation, but he always wanted to make them happy. He loved his sister Patty. She's sitting right there. Through thick and thin, Jim was devoted to her. They developed a friendship throughout their years that compares to no other. They both loved a good joke and sharing music, and Patty has a great voice. Patty just lost her husband Christmas Eve. Jim loved his girls, Mindy and Amy. He was such an amazing, caring, fun, thoughtful, and supportive dad. He played with them all their lives. Told you nobody was going to cry. And he counseled them when no one else's words matter. They really miss him. He comforted them through hardships and guided them in their life paths. They were the light of his life, and he saw the potential that oftentimes they could not see. He got to see them graduate college, develop their careers, and marry, giving them away and sharing those precious father-daughter dances. Jim loved his grandson, Everett. Didn't Papa love you, Everett? He was very, very much loved by that little boy as well, kind of in a spiritual way. Everett simply delighted in Jim's presence, And as Jim's days got shorter, Everett adapted, demonstrated the sweetest affection, but then he seemed to know when it was over. Of course, we wish that he could have met little Ada, our new one, and any others to come, but Everett, oh my goodness, you. That's true. Last but not least, Jim loved me. While living and loving his life a lot, he shared it all with me. He was kind and generous and supportive in every way. He gave far more than he took, and he always elevated me. He was a joy to live with and required very little to be happy. That's probably really lucky. He simply was the best. My memories are sweet, and I will be forever grateful that he chose me. No doubt, Jim's love touched you too. That's why you're here. Thank you for being part of our lives and for coming here to celebrate Jim's. Your presence honors us, and there is no doubt that his love lives on through all of us.
Just looking at that picture does something to my heart because he looked so much like his dad. Gail asked me to say some words, but boy, we have already been blessed to the very depths of our being by his friend's witness of his life and by Gail sharing a very beautiful life of love together for some 44 years. She gave me two scriptures. She said, I want you to base whatever you say on these two scriptures. Micah 6:8 and Matthew 22:37 through 39. Micah 6:8, Old Testament. He has shown you what is good and what the Lord requires of you. And that is to do justly. He certainly did. To love mercy. He lived that. And to walk humbly with your God. And in the New Testament, Matthew gives us the ultimate command. And you know what it is. It's love. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. That's a good one because of Jim's mind, his intellect, his interest in anything and everything. And love your neighbor as you love yourself. We've heard some powerful and beautiful witnesses from his friends and his wife. How Jim has touched every one of your hearts. That's why you're here. That's why you're celebrating his life today. His love of family. And see that little boy's smile. That proves it. I have 18 grandkids. I love my kids, but I adore my grandkids. And we were just blessed with 3 greats, and I am totally. May God bless this family with many, many more. He had such a love for life and a love for people. He had a ministry, just like his dad had a ministry. Jim was brought up in a loving, devoted family. They had deep roots in their faith. They loved God and they loved others. They lived out that you too in such a beautiful way. I first met the family back in the 1970s when I came to Tarpon Springs as a young preacher. And I could not have asked or sought or prayed for a better family than the Morris family. To be active in the life of your church, they were just so beautifully in their faith, and in their outreach and their love and their ministry. We had to move away after 8 years. And it's amazing that I ended up back here after my ministry came to retirement. So I come back to Tarpon and I got a call. Gail called me and she said, Jim wanted to see me. Eddie, hold up that little book. So I got out this little red church directory and I looked up the Morris family, and there's this curly-headed teenager, a curly-headed teenager. And I went to the house, and Jim was in the last stages, and he wanted to see me. It blessed my heart that he wanted to see me. I didn't even know if he would remember anything about me. But I did love that Morris family, and I had prayer with Jim, and I got to know Gail. And we were going to COVID had messed up the whole celebration, and as she shared with you, it's been very difficult. But here we are today to honor and celebrate one of the most beautiful lives as a father, as a grandfather, as a husband, as a friend, as a child of God. I always like to know how people get together, and she shared how they got together. Both of them working with troubled children through the Eckerd camps. And she said, we knew each other for 5 years. And I know Gail wanted to make sure that she made the right decision. And she and Jim, I'm sure, talked. There were sparks. There was all kind of things bringing them together. And I kind of felt like Gail kind of was looking for someone a cross between Billy Graham and St. Paul. But she found something better. She found Jim Morris. She found a person that the two of them have really lived out this universal two, this you two, to do justice, to love mercy, to walk with God all the days of your life, to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, to love your neighbor as yourself. I don't know what kind of answer you got when you were kneeling in the chapel. If you heard a voice from heaven or just in your heart, you knew, Gail, that you had found the right man to share life with. Married in the First Christian Church back in 1981. Blessed with 2 beautiful daughters. Blessed with a grandchild, 2 grandchild. Blessed with so many friends who are here today to celebrate his life. I have loved the pictures, Gail. I have loved getting to know Jim. And I praise God for the kind of man that he was and the kind of things that he did. I had a poker group too as a preacher. I was not very good at it like Jim was. But as time goes by, you know, as Alan Jackson sings, the older I get, the fewer friends I've got. But the ones I've got have always got my back. And I think that's the way Jim was with his friends. You're here today because you loved him and you knew what he loved. He loved God. He loved family. He loved friends. He loved people, and he loved ministering to people and helping people. Patty, his sister, told me that he never, even fighting cancer, never lost his sense of humor. She said that when they found out that Dr. Bev and Dot had Alzheimer's, and he said, Patty said, should we start worrying about it? He said, no. Gail and Dino should start worrying about it. That's the kind of sense of humor he came up with. But one thing Patty shared with me she said that as he fought with this disease, that he said, it's never going to define my life. It may define my death, but it will never define my life. And he lived out his life as full as anyone could have lived out their life. Loving family, loving friends, staying concerned about life and what he could do for others. If you can live out your days with that kind of rock-solid foundation, Micah 6:8, Matthew, if you can live out your life loving God, walking humbly, at the end you can say with what Jim said to you, Patty, I'm at peace with my horizon. I'm at peace with my horizon. My grandfather had cancer. I was young. I was driving him to the hospital. He said to me, Jackie, do you know my favorite scripture? I said, no, Grandfather. What is your favorite scripture? He said, it's 1 Corinthians 2:9. And then he said, in a shaky voice, he said, as it is written, I have not seen, nor ear heard, neither has it entered the heart of man, the things that God has prepared for those that love him. And Jim loved him. Let us pray. We thank you for the life. We thank you for the testimony and the witness of this wonderful man and of his family. We praise you for this opportunity to celebrate his life. And we ask you to remind us that nothing in all creation, as St. Paul wrote, nothing in all creation can separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus, our Lord. We have a congregational hymn.
The idea of powwow is, I'll get this fire started. I hope that's not a big delay. All right, and then we'll each come up with our stick, and we'll lay it on the fire, and say our brief final thoughts on Jim. A little story, a little vignette, just a simple thought, whatever you want. And I'll take my shot at a one-match powwow.
All right, go.
But it's
So I just wanted to say that Jim was a rare person. The world was a better place for him having been in it. It's a sadder place for him being gone. And the same is true with my life. It was better with him in it, and it's now sadder that he's gone. Sure do miss you, Jim.
You know, when I think what Jim meant to me, it's just that my life was so much richer, so much greater because I knew Jim. I had the opportunity to work with him 3 different times through our careers, and each time he was just so intelligent, so competent. And once you knew him a little bit more, on top of that, he was always so genuine and just a great, great friend, you know, and I'm so fortunate to get to know him with that way. The other thing I think about is when he was and Gail were going through the struggles, he would always send out notes about how he was doing and everything, and we communicate back and forth. And no matter what, Jim would always respond to me with mine, and he'd invariably say, you know, your note made me smile, you know, and I said, that's exactly what I wanted, you know, is that I got an opportunity to make Jim smile when all his life he was making me smile constantly and feeling good for just being in his presence. And not only did it make him smile, then at the end he would say, you know, just more and more, Gail and I realized how blessed we are for the friends that are with us. And no matter what the circumstance, he always included that, you know, and it's just always about somebody else. So again, he was just a great, great friend, a great person, and I know my life was just so much richer because of him.
I'll keep it brief, Keith, but it might take a second. I met Jim when I was 20 years old. I remember that age because that's when I started at camp. I went through my initial training period, and for the first couple of weeks you're assigned with a co-counselor, so you're not by yourself. But then you know that day's coming when you're by yourself, and you're feeling a little apprehensive. So that day came with me, and I got through that day, got my group through powwow, tucked in bed, and Jim was my supervisor. Greg was my other supervisor, but Jim was my supervisor, and he came bebopping down the trail that night, and he came into a chief's tent, and we were going to evaluate the day. And typically what that involves is talking about what happened during the day and something about the kids and whatnot. But Jim had something else on his mind at that point in time in his life. He wanted to talk about this young lady that he'd met at girls' camp. And I don't know if I have all the particulars exactly right, but he talked about how beautiful she was, how kind she was, how easy it was to talk to her. And I don't remember all the other particulars, but he summed it up by saying she was perfect in every way. It's true. And of course he married that young lady. Ended up having 2 lovely daughters, you might say perfect in every way. And went on to live this beautiful life. And although his years were short, he lived a very rich, long life. And I will miss him very much.
My path with Jim was a little bit different through camp, but I think the lessons, we all learn lessons from one another. And the lesson that I learned from his is that hearts are not always finished. It's an ongoing growth and we're always developing. And that if we embrace generosity and grace, then we're on the right path. And I think that's a great gift that he had. And that's the great gift that he shared with me.
So the thing I want to tell you about is don't forget his laugh. One of the best memories I have is some of the most fun times is when our families went to Beacon Hill. They talked about that home up in North Florida, and we went to Beacon Hill and we had a lot of fun. And we had 2 really special memories, and one is going crabbing. At night, they would go out, and these little crabs would come up out of the sand, and my sons, the girls, would run up and down the beach chasing these crabs with flashlights. And my one son, you know, he was all brave and everything till it was like go time, right? And then the crab would come up and he'd screech like a little girl. And Jim's laugh was just unbelievable. I could just see the joy on his face. He just loved my kids as much as he loved his, I do believe. And then the other thing is, we had an opportunity one night. We went out to dinner. And Mindy and Amy were babysitting, and they were dressing our little boys up as girls and putting makeup on them. But that was happening. While that was happening, we were out to dinner, and we walked by this place, and some poor lone slob was at the microphone, and he was talking. He was trying to con people in to come up and sing karaoke. And we were like making jokes on the way to the car, and we get in the car, and it wasn't any time at all when we turned that car around and went back karaokeing. And you know, I remember I got you, babe.
I got
You guys were singing
Jim
that.
and me, we were a duet.
And then Jim and Bill were a duet. And they sang King Tut, Funky Tut. And it was just a really good time. And they giggled and laughed so hard. And it's the laughter that you always experienced when you were in his presence. He always made us laugh. So I love that about our Jim.
That was part of the Chiefs' job around the powwow. If it did start to dwindle, they would add some sticks to it. It probably was clear today as I spoke this afternoon that I had a great admiration for Jim, and probably of all the people, all my friends, all the people that I know, I think I most would like to emulate his life, and that is why, as I said earlier today, I'm going to carry his spirit in my heart, his song that he sang over and over for me, and it just meant so much to me, and I'm sure going to miss him a lot. And Gail, we're still going to get together a bunch of times, okay?
Please.
When I was in an extremely rough point in my life, I got a letter from Jim that all I could say after I read the letter was, this is what a friend does. And it meant a great deal to me, and it still means a great deal to me. And I am not in the class of a wife or a daughter, but I know that I'm going to miss him for the rest of my life. And I am so glad that I knew him when I did.
I'm Gail's friend from high school, and didn't see Gail and Jim all that much because we live up in New York State. But once every couple years we'd see him, and Jim and I were the early birds. And so we had some conversations, and so sometimes just one conversation can mean the world. And my conversations with Jim meant enough to me that my husband and I drove down from New York to be here. I think, I can't remember if it was William James or Henry James who said there are three important things in life. And the first is to be kind, and the second is to be kind, and the third is to be kind. And Jim was truly kind and very, very wise. Thank you, Jim.
The aforementioned husband who wanted to bring my wife down to honor Jim. I didn't know Jim very well, but I immediately recognized a kind being that had all the right values in life. And I think that I share those. And to me, the greatest of all treasures is friends. And the testimony that I saw today is enviable. I think that he truly, I would kid about this for myself, but I think it's really true for this guy. He was the Bill Gates of friends, man. The guy was loaded with wonderful friendships, and it's the greatest of all treasures, and he deserves it. So think he was a wonderful guy.
All right, put your stick in. Put it in there. All right. Throw it in. Good job. Okay.
So, my papa is my favorite. My papa went to heaven because he was, and I sent something to him because I like to was this fun. And myself, I went with Papa. I miss him because he went to heaven. And my mama is good. He didn't get to heaven. My mama is, I love my mama. And my mama is what my mama is. And I like my mama. I love her. And my mommy is my, and then my mommy is the best. Because
Go Gators.
mine is. I'm Everett and I don't have, and I don't go to heaven, but I'm a strong man, and I'm really good, and I love all the people I love.
Good job, baby. Good job, buddy.
We love you too. And I love Aunt Linda all the time, and I love all of my favorite people. I love faculty, and I love all my people I love all the time.
Good job. All right, go sit down. Keep going.
I love it all the time. Good all the time.
Yay!
Here, here.
What strikes me about Jim is his warmth, his warm spirit, and particularly manifested in his warm smile. And we first met Jim and Gail in the 80s, and then we moved back north, and so we didn't get down here so much, but then we started coming down once a year. Once a year, when you came into the house, Jim would make you feel like you were the best person on earth. And that, I'm sure that's the way he did with everyone. And even when he was arguing with you and had differing opinions, he'd have that smile. And that smile would say, we're not adversaries, we're just having a good-hearted discussion here. And the last example of his smile for me was when we went on vacation together, the four of us, at Lake Lure, and I brought a terrible cough to the group. Gail went home sick, Joanne went home sick, Jim fell down the steps
And broke a rib.
broke his ribs. Never stopped smiling. We had the best time.
We did.
It didn't matter. Jim just was this positive, warm light, and it's something I'll always remember and try to emulate.
I'm Ed's wife. I was at Lake Lure. I was there for that wonderful vacation. It truly was. So he kind of spoke for me, and so I promised my son that I would speak for him because he couldn't be here. Gail made reference to my son is Joseph, and Gail made reference to Jim's relationship with him. And I mean, Jim knew Joe from the time he was born, but really did not. As Ed said, we moved away, so really did not see him since he was 4 years old. But in the last year of Jim's life, Jim always had a heart for my son, who faced a lot of physical challenges. And in the last year of his life, they connected and decided that they would, on Sundays, they're both very intellectual. Both of them loved to explore topics and talk about everything in the world. They were just so interested, both of them. In many ways, I think they were just kindred spirits. And so for a year, as Gail said, on Sundays, they would pick topics, listen to podcasts, read stories, and have discussions for 2.5 hours. And it started out, it was just Joe and Jim, and then my son's girlfriend Hannah joined in, and then I think Gail also joined in. But that was really precious time where Joe came to know Jim and Jim came to know Joe. I think in a way that that no one else has. There was a connection there that was very special. My son on Sundays will say to me so often, "I miss my friend." So I'm bringing his love here, and as a parent, I can tell you that there's really nothing more wonderful or no greater gift that someone can give to you than to know and love your child. And Jim gave that to us.
I'd like to share that same sentiment. Jim was Uncle Jim to our sons and Gail, Aunt Gail. And as I said, Gail had taught me many years ago that our friends are our chosen family. And our family has had no closer relationship with anyone than we have with Jim and Gail. So it was truly a blessing for us and for our sons to have that close relationship. Not only of fun, but of serious conversations, things that they could, talk about and share. And we certainly will miss them. But we are very grateful for that too. Thank you.
While we're on that topic, I'd like to add the same thing. Our daughter grew up best friends with Mindy, and Jim was like a second father to her. And Gail is our dear friend as well, but Beth would go and play poker with the guys. She got to be a part of that crew somehow. She went to concerts even just with Jim when Gail couldn't go as well. And that's just such a special, special meaning to us. So we did come one night for a game night. I'm not sure we'll forgive them for that really, because I can't even remember the name of the game, but it was some game where they couldn't tell us the rules, but you just had to play. We like games and we were all for games, but we need to know how to play the game. So anyway,
that's how we bonded with them.
Not going to wait to the end. Okay, I have two things. I wouldn't have thought of this one except that Ed was asking me about when I first met Jim and, our early days. And I think I mentioned that he was not a really stellar dresser. Well, when I knew Jim, he wore overalls, which we all wore overalls, but he had very skinny legs. He always had skinny legs. And they would just hang on him and way down. But he had a hole in his butt, and he didn't wear underwear. I fell in love with Jim. I mean, okay, that's one thing. I have the second thing, and this is more of it's really a precious thing. Jim made me a playlist. I would say to any of you, not just the men, but probably the women too, if you love music, if you love particular artists, whatever, he made me a playlist 2 years before he passed away. I told you that he heard more in music than I did, and he did. And I would just hear it as background. I liked, certain songs I liked, certain songs I knew, maybe the chorus, I sometimes got it a little wrong, but, I just sort of knew how it seemed to go. And, but Jim knew the words, and he knew what he was leaving me, and he knew he was passing away. Some of the songs were lovely, and I think that he really was feeling this warmth and fervent love for me. Others, I'm not sure why he put them on that playlist. But they've made me really think about things. Some of them were about the end of life. I mean, even though that's not exactly what the the songwriter might have intended. Specifically, it was about things coming to an end, being ready to go, the long ride home, waiting on June, many things that were suggesting it's coming to an end. I love those songs. I did well, and so let me let me pull it back now. So, I never really listened to that playlist. I had it for 2 years. I never listened to it. For Gail from Jim, that's what he said. And one day after he passed away, probably 3 months later, I was trying to figure out Sonos. Oh my gosh, I've been trying to figure out a lot of things. You know, Spotify. I know those things were not my deal. You know, those were Jim's deal. But I knew we had a Sonos thing, and I was thinking Spotify might connect. And anyway, I looked at that list, and I thought, for Gail from Jim. I thought, I need to play this. And I sat in the kitchen, and I couldn't leave because I didn't know how the Sonos worked. I didn't know how I connected it. I didn't know how this exactly worked. But I knew that this playlist was for me, and every song would come on, and I'd be thinking, oh, I love this. Oh, I wonder why I put this one on. You know, it's just, but it was precious, and to this day, it is precious, and it's not quite 3 hours, but I was sitting there. I couldn't leave it because I didn't know how to get it back, and I didn't know what to do. But if you might think of this in your lifetime, because I know we're all thinking we're eternally here. We're not. That is precious beyond words. It is, I will listen to that playlist and I will interpret it my way. But I also will interpret it his way, I think, in terms of the piece of it that he might have meant for me, or some of the realities that maybe I need to kind of, you know, recognize. I mean, no life is perfect, no union is perfect. There's hard times, there's good times, there's wish I weren't married to you times, but, well, maybe not for everybody. I think maybe Jim might have felt that way at times, but not me, of course. But, you know, I just think that's precious to leave something that's so a part of you. And so I share that with you for whatever it's worth. Keep it in mind. We're not here forever.
I have an anecdote that I think Jim would have loved. So
Now would be a good time to put that stick in.
Oh. Yes, Chief.
Exactly.
As a lot of you know, I was here when Jim passed, and towards the end, you know it's coming, and there's minutia that goes along with that, with physically passing. Things to do, calls to make, morticians to call, etc. One of them is calling the municipality to say someone has passed away at this address, and that felt to me, and I called whomever, I don't know, and I said, hi, this is Dane, I'd like to report there's been a death at this house, it's expected, etc. Okay, what's the name, what's the address, and I give that stuff. Backing up, James Belzer Morris, Jr. Well, for those of you who know, James Belzer Morris, full stop, also passed away here. And the operator, or whomever, said, I'm sorry, sir, that person passed away in
1990 maybe? No.
2000? And so here I am, and I'm immediately grieving, but I'm thinking somewhat clearly, and I'm having this moment of, is this one of those? Sorry, sir, he's been dead for 30 years.
Twilight Zone.
We don't have that person here. And I said, I assure you, he's passed away. And she said, well, is there a suffix? And that's when it all clicked. But in the immediate grieving and the crying and the tears, I thought, well, he would just have loved this moment of talking to the county clerk and saying, no, I promise you. And I feel like he would have just gotten a kick out of that and had that laugh and that smile and talked about it for years. So that's what I want to share. Thank you.
Well, you've heard from the youngest of the talkers. I don't know where he went, but I think from what I've heard, I'm the oldest of you that have known Jim since he was actually a little kid. And our parents, they were from the Methodist Church. His father, Bev, they call him, which I thought was very, very strange to have a girl's name, you know. But he and my dad were very, very good friends. My mother was a philosophy major, along with being an English major, and they all just got along great. They had a Sunday school class together, and they would come out to our house out on Lake Tarpon, which is where Anderson Park is now. And we had a horse, and Buddy would be out there with Patty, and Buddy, I always call him, he was Buddy. And he was talking about his fashion, he was probably the geekiest kid I had ever seen in my life. Because he was just a little kid to me, because he was like, you know, maybe 3 years younger, something like that, 4 years maybe. Which to me, you know, when you're that age is a lifetime. I'm the big kid, he's a little kid. But he would be at the house. When I say he's geeky, is he had all his braces on and was having to wear, his parents made him wear that brace thing, you know, that big wire that's sticking out, which I had to do as well, so that's why I thought it was so funny. And then we kind of lost track later on until many years later, he becomes Jim Morris, Dr. Morris included. And it was just so funny, that transition, but that smile, that little sense of humor, that little joke that he was always about to play on somebody as a little kid was still there for Jim, as opposed to Buddy. I don't think he liked being called Buddy. I'd call him.
Not in his. Well, he didn't mind, but he didn't want me to call him that.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, so it is so wonderful to be able to reconnect and be back. You know, we do the house concerts together and with Gail and Jim, and that was just what a treasure, absolute treasure being with Jim. And I'm always so appreciative of seeing a life from, not the beginning, he wasn't a baby, but from such a long time to being somebody that's just a wonderful, wonderful man. Anyway, thank you.
So I loved my dad for many things, but I think one of the greatest is all of you here, and all the people that were they aren't still here, but were at my dad's memorial, because he didn't just forge friendships for himself, he did for us. And we have had an amazing group of people to help raise us, truly. I'm so grateful to all of you, because you helped us become who we are. It was not just our dad and our mom, who's great, but our dad pulled all of you guys in. And then you all took on this role of helping us be people and be able to handle losing our dad, because we still have all of you and all of these memories, and I'm just so grateful. So thank you all. Thank you for listening to my son, letting him just go off. I think he has a little more Mindy than me, I guess. But thank you. I'm truly, truly grateful. So I guess that's it. That was my stick.
I'll go on a little more.
No.
It's funny, as soon as she started talking, I was thinking, yep, that's exactly what I wanted to say. So, yeah, good job going first. No, but I'm gonna step back because I just noticed the acoustics were better. And I've been known for being quiet most of my life, just like my nephew. So I want to make sure my voice. No, when Dane and I were getting married, well, when Dane and I even started dating, I wanted him to meet people that mattered to me, and I got to meet his friends, and he had so many of these friends from Clemson and these like great people, just really truly beautiful friendships, and I wanted him to meet you guys, like so many of you guys, and I would tell him stories, and he knew everyone by story, and so sometimes when I'm reintroducing you guys to him, it's like, oh, this is the one who, and I'll try to tell him, but Amy and I have these memories of these friendships that my parents had, and they mattered to me when it came time to plan my wedding. You know, it was like, I need to make sure that you guys are going to be there. I need to make sure that these dates are going to matter, or that this date's going to work for like you guys. And my guest list felt so full. My day felt so full. It felt full of all of my people. And there really weren't that many people there that were my age, except for, you know, my best friend who told me after the wedding it was the best day of my life because I got to hang out with all of our friends, meaning the poker guys and all of you. Like, it was just like the people that matter in our lives, the people that I think of as being our friends, like, they're you guys. And I have some friends too. Like Beth is just one, but she sticks around. And the other thing that I think my dad taught me, I mean, I'm glad you guys are all here, so I've got 24 sticks, so I'm just gonna tell you all of them. But no, the other thing that my dad, so I kept thinking about two things today. One, if I died, I want to have made the kind of impact that he's had, because I know, like, when I look at every single one of you guys, I actually kind of know the relationship my dad had with you. I know the kinds of things that my dad would talk about with you, because it's going to be different with what he talked about with Ellis, and it's going to be different with what he talked about with Larry or any, you know, and my dad knew you guys, and I don't know about you, but like I still remember, and my sister and I talk about this all the time, like we still can talk to him, like I still hear what he would say, and I see the way he would put his skinny little legs across he'd cross it like at a weird spot, and he'd lean forward a little, and he'd rock, and he'd do this a lot of times with his hand, and he'd lean forward, and he'd nod, like really slow, and then he'd just let you keep talking, which for me is great. And then he never had judgment. There was never, but he would make these observations that you're like, oh, either like, well, duh, like of course, but you needed to hear it, or he'd say something that you're like, I'd never thought of that before. And Amy and I both still hear him, but what's been crazy for me since losing him is that she's become my dad. She's also my sister, but she's become like my dad. And when I'm not okay, I can call her, and Mom, you're really great too, but like
Not like Dad.
No, but my sister can remove all emotions. So recently I was driving, because we've been driving for 6 months, and I was driving and I called Amy and I was not okay, and I started yelling at her, not because I was mad at her, just because I was angry, and afterwards I said, I'm so sorry, like I don't mean to take this out on you, and she said, you're okay. She said, nothing you can say to me is gonna change anything about us, and if you need to yell, you can yell. And that's kind of like who my dad was with us. Okay, I'm going on a tangent about my sister, but the other thing that I kept thinking today was that, like, not only do I want to have friendships that I know he has poured into every one of you, which is why instead of a normal funeral, it's really late and you're all still here and people care about him and talking about him and loving him, but also, like, he was so happy to live, and I want to remember to do that, because my dad told us, like, obviously we don't have kids yet, but Amy and Chelsea have these little babies, and every single stage so far has been my favorite stage, and that's what my dad said about raising us. Every single time he'd say, this is where we are, this is where I want to be. There was never like, I want to look back. There was never, I'm looking forward to. It was like, no, this right now, this is my favorite stage. This is what I love. And I think sometimes I get really caught up in what's coming, or like a home, or like what has been, and all of those things. And I look forward to that stuff where my dad would just be like, no, like right now, this is it, like this right now. And so like tonight just has felt that way because you guys love him, and I could live in this night forever and just be good. So anyway, I really like him a lot. Another stick.
Floridian, I gotta get up here to get warm. Okay. This is a little...
Yeah, you gotta buy that come to get warm, right?
Well, I didn't know Jim a long time. It goes back a long time ago. My cousin knew him in high school, and my cousin and I were going to FSU up in Tallahassee, and that's where Jim's life and my life overlapped. And so even though it was kind of a brief period, you know, when I look back, he was one of the most soft-spoken, kind-hearted guys I've ever met. And I've met a lot of people. That was 50 years ago, okay? And is it 50? Dean, what is it?
That's good.
50.
Long time.
So, you know, that to me that says a lot. When I think of somebody who's a good listener, a really good listener, he always comes to mind, and I'll never forget him. He was a wonderful guy.
Oh, I can't stop crying. This is not going to go well. But I was one of Jim's girls. Step back.
Don't fall. It's the smoke's fault. We know it.
I don't know if it was Bill or Larry. It could have been any of you today. You did a great job. But the things you said about him listening and finding what's unique in all of us and getting us, and it was a little sacrilegious, the whole what would Jim do thing. I could not agree more, to be honest, because I will live my life like that. He was a second father to me. The last conversation we had before he was ill, I was here the night that he passed away. But the time before, it was Father's Day, and I called him, and that was very appropriate because he wasn't just another father, he was a very, very good friend. I told him things I've never told anybody else. We did our first tequila shot together.
Okay, here we go.
Oh man, I miss him. I miss him a lot. But the way that he made people feel, all of us, me, like, to listen, to understand. Okay. That's all. Yeah.
Known Jim a long time. We met when Sunset Hills Elementary in first grade. And we were, yeah. And I was thinking about it fairly recently. Tarpon Springs was very much a Greek community, and he was really the first non-Greek friend I had. And so all year long we were friends and everything, and then towards the end of school, during the year they hold birthday parties for the kids, and ours was a summer birthday. And we got up, and everyone, there was 4 or 5 of us, they were asking, okay, when's your birthday? Turns out both of ours were July 11th. We looked at each other, it's like, wait, we're on the same day? And here we are, been best friends the whole time, and maintained a friendship from there on out. It was unlike none other that I can think of in certain ways. My birthday will never be the same, you know. This past year, it's the first year he wasn't there, that couldn't give a call or anything, or just because regularly I think about it. Always have. I mean, there were times that we were seeing each other a lot more than others, but, you know, always maintained contact. And like everyone has said here, as far as somebody that, a level-headed, I mean, I can't think of anybody more level-headed than him. I was asking Gail earlier, did he ever get upset about anything? Because I never saw him upset.
Me.
All I ever saw was smiles and good times. And when I also went to FSU, and he contacted me about a concert there, was actually a comedy show, someone I'd never heard of, which was Steve Martin. And we went to the Steve Martin show and laughed and laughed. And just throughout the years, so many things that were just very, very nice. And I can remember when he'd met Gail and he got in touch with me, telling me about this girl that he'd met, and you know, he was just really totally infatuated. Couldn't say enough about Gail. And just a lot of good times. I'll never have another birthday the same. And regularly, as we talk about music, and I know how much he was into music, and I like music a lot. And I see these people on YouTube, some of it looks new and stuff, and I always want to be able to reach out to them and say, hey, did you hear this person? What do you think of them? Da-da-da. Get to it. But I know he'll always be there in my heart. So I'm sure he'll always be there in all your hearts, too. So, you know, for Greeks we say, let your memory be eternal, and his will be eternal.
I'm not a public speaker, so I'm not going to say much, but I'm Keith's daughter, Yvonne, and I guess all I'll say is that as a child, you lose a lot of your memories of people and things, so many people who you're not all the way around all the time, you don't really remember as you get older, but I always remember Jim, even as a kid, even when I went to Dad's work at Eckerd with him sometimes, occasionally on Bring Your Daughter to Work Day. And I always remember his smile and his laugh, even have those childhood memories, and I just think that really represents the kind of person he was. He just impacted me from then. And I want to thank him for being such a good friend to my dad, and I don't know what he'd do without all of his friends, with all his interests, and like you were talking about, wide range of interests and all those books and highlighted stuff. That's my dad, and we cannot keep up with that kind of stimulation. So.
You go, girl.
All right, so I really wasn't going to talk, but because everyone else did, I feel like I kind of have to. I don't have a stick either.
Here.
But
it's
Thank
already
you.
out.
It's out. I'm going to tell a story about a rug. So this rug was about a 4-month endeavor with my wife. If you know her, she's not spontaneous about anything. But because it was more than $200, it took about a 4-month decision. And then we hemmed and hawed over this rug, and I was like, spend $4,000. I don't care, just buy the rug. So anyways, we finally decide on a rug, okay? We have a deaf, 150-pound Great Dane. I am on a trip. I'm a flight attendant. I'm gone. She calls me at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I am too tired. And I'm just like, I listen to her, but I don't listen to her, and I go back to sleep. And she called Jim because we had the rug for 1 day, you guys. 1 day. And the 150-pound dog proceeded to vomit and other things all over the rug. And she was losing her mind. So she called me. I was not supportive. I was asleep I think I was in Utah. I don't know. So she called her dad. And she said, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill the dog. And this is why I love Jim. He said, you could do that. But what are you going to do with the body? And you know, it made her laugh. It made her snap out of it. And it brought her down to earth. And we still laugh about it to this day. And I will just say that I learned a lot how to talk to his daughter. Because she's not always the easiest, but I do love her. So I thank Jim for that.
You
still have the rug.
No. Got the fire going again.
Yeah. Chelsea, that's so Jim. You know, and I just had the same, Gail, the same image the first time I saw Jim. He came into Chuckwagon, which is where the kids at camp would come for their meals, and I'm going, oh, who is this guy? he had bib overalls on. He had the hole in the butt, you know, and he always a little bit of swagger, you know, in his step. And those little Rangers are running around. These are 8 to 11-year-olds. They're running around, and he had total command without doing anything, you know. And they just sat around. They just loved him. It was obvious. I don't know. Thoughts about Jim are that, to me, that you know, there is a bit of a difference between knowledge and wisdom, and Jim had both. You know, I just learned so much from him. And then there's a tension between being and doing. And Jim was a doer, but he didn't just do the act, he was the act. It was part of his being. And he was just so genuine in that way. Wisdom and knowledge, you can read through Job 28. I think it's just a beautiful poem that talks about that. You know, I can't add anything more to anything that's been said today. It's all so wonderful. Thank you all for sharing it. You loved him. I loved him. And I think we can all say we still love him.
I'm not good with words, with public speaking, so I just want to say I'll never forget Jim's smile. I'm Dean's wife, Dean, the one that with the gray hair. He went to elementary school with me. Yeah. And anyway, I'll always remember his smile, and he was just such a down-to-earth guy. And I got to know Gail more. I met them through Dean, okay? I'm an outsider. So, you know, I didn't get to meet Jim and Gail till after I was married with Dean and we had our children, Andrew and Melissa. And Gail was a great instrumental to the loss of my son. She counseled Melissa, and we lost our son to a drunk driver. And anyway, you even met with me. I'll always be so appreciative of what you did, just trying to help me through this. And the memory I have when we first met Jim, I think, was when you guys came to our house.
I think
for one of Dean's birthday parties, okay? And they both had the same birthday. So it was just beautiful meeting you and the family. And then over the years, you know, we all got busy with our lives. And, you know, I wish that we would have been closer, getting together more. We did enjoy the concerts at your house, and it was nice. And I was just overwhelmed losing Andrew. So, you know, for a span of 10 years, you know, I just secluded myself in a way. But I'm so glad that I bonded with you, Gail, because of our tragedy. And I'll always remember Jim's smile. I remember the time we met for ice cream. That was so nice that we had that memory together. And I'll just always be grateful to you guys for just being our friends. Thank you so much.
You folks have said so much of what I'd say, and I'm not going to repeat it. I just love Jim, love Gail,
love the girls, love their spouses, and just love the Morris family. But I think one unique thing that I would want to share about my appreciation of Jim, which I don't think he even had a chance to know, but that is, I'm a woman of strong faith, and coming along, he was the first person I ever met that struggled with faith. He didn't denounce it, and when I met him, he didn't fully embrace it. And I thought, wow, this is weird, you know, but, and seeing how he walked that, questions and doubt and all, was just unique and interesting to me. And I've come to appreciate that more, at being at peace and trusting doubt and not feeling the need to throw it all out, but to live in that tension. And I just love thinking of Jim, knowing the fullness of what God has done through his love now. And the last time Ellis and I spent time with Jim and Gail out on this dock in November of 2019, and it was kind of like the capstone, you know, listening to him talk about where he is now and what he's facing, and seeing his love for his family again. But I just really appreciate the way he could engage in the struggle of faith, and he was a role model.
House concert people.
Thank you for letting us know.
I'm a relative newbie considering 10 plus years on the concert series, and I can't say that, I mean, I just absolutely love it and fell in love with it before. This particular group was not my first house concert series, but it's the one that I spent the most, I mean, more than 10 years dedicatedly attending. What I have observed today and what I know is that since I've met Jim and Gail and their daughters, beautiful people, what I have heard is that there are beautiful people here. And something that goes through my mind all the time is it takes one to know one. So I would say that there's an incredible group of people here today. We're all different. We all have our great things and we all have our foibles. But isn't it amazing that we're here? We will all miss Jim. I'll miss Jim. We just have to carry it in our hearts. And you're wonderful people. Blessings.
I'm way more emotional than I should be, so I really apologize. I'm Diana Keith's daughter, and I'm probably going to have to write a letter because I just keep crying. But I've dealt with cancer the last year and a half, and it's made me appreciate the friendships that my dad and Jim and all the guys had that lasted my lifetime. And it's made me more appreciative of the people in my life. And I feel we're kindred spirits in that way, and that I live to try to give back, and I feel like the recent experience has made me want to do that even more. So he's been an inspiration through my journey, and I wish I had gotten more personal time with him, but a positive memory that was just, I guess, how life works out is my husband and I were driving back from Gainesville, where we'd gone to see David Wilcox play, and I had gone to the pool and was coaching, and then I see that I have like a bunch of texts saying David Wilcox is supposedly playing in Palm Harbor tonight. Like, I'm gonna try to email the guy and see if we can get in. And I guess he'd had a back and forth, and then I get home and it's like, okay, we got to get ready. You know, we're going to go to Palm Harbor. He said there was an opening and we can do it. And I'm like, well, where is this? And he says, Jim Morrison. And I was like, well, my dad has a friend, you know, Jim Morrison. And so I then get on the phone and I call Dad and I'm like, hey, where does he live? Is this his house? And it was, and I just felt welcomed, even though I hadn't been around him in so long. And you know, I guess I was bothering his daughters back when we were youngsters, but
We don't remember.
Yeah.
I remember, but also he called us that night and said he won't believe the beautiful time we had, and I hope you girls are going to get time together. So even though, but you cherished it. So
well,
it's
no, and
awesome.
I did too, and I've thought about it, and things happen for a reason. So hopefully it reconnects us, and hopefully we all live the lives that we were intended, and make the positive impressions that Jim made on all the people that we come into contact with.
I'll close the powwow with a thought that just came to me as I listened to all of the tributes to Jim that is and all of what you said. And my theme, and when I spoke back at the service, was Diamond Jim, and how Jim was such a treasure of a person to each of us, and how he wove the friendships amongst us. But it became clear to me as I heard everybody speak from all their various different perspectives, that as he was Diamond Jim to some of us literally, some of us figuratively, I mean, he was Diamond Jim because he thought of all of us as diamonds too. We were diamonds to him, is why he was such a diamond to us. So I'm going to just close. I'm going to just say it one more time. Diamond Jim.
My life goes on in endless song above earth's lamentation. The real, though far off hymn, thou tells thy new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear its music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest loudly roars? I hear the trumpet liveth, and though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from When tyrants when friends rejoice, both far and near. How can I keep from singing in prison cell and dungeon vile? Our thoughts to them are winging when friends by shame are undefiled. How can I keep from
If it be your will that I speak no more, and my voice be still as it was before, I will speak no more. I shall abide until I am spoken for, if it be your will. If it be your will that a voice be true, from this broken hill I will sing to you. From this broken hill all your praises they shall ring, if it be your will to let me sing.